Today we will discuss about the work of psychologist. Chapter 1 from the book Introduction to Psychology by Morgan and King. The work of psychologist. Psychologists have the whole field of behavior to choose from, so their work is pretty varied. One psychologist may study behavior of group, another might be a psychotherapist who tries to help people with their behavioral problems, and still another might study the sensory processes involved in our perception of the world. Psychologists differ not only in their behavioral interests but in the degree to which they are involved with the application of psychology to life's problems. So, another way of describing the work of psychologists is to discuss some of the major subfields of psychology, which include clinical psychology, counseling psychology, school and education psychology, experimental and physiological psychology, industrial and organizational psychology, social psychology, developmental psychology, community psychology, clinical psychology. They diagnose psychological disorders and treat them by means of psychotherapy. The difference between clinical psychologist, psychiatrist and psychoanalyst is: clinical psychologist holds a PhD or MA degree, cannot prescribe drugs to treat behavior disorders, use standardized tests as an aid to diagnosing behavior disorder. Whereas a psychiatrist holds an MD degree. Psychoanalyst is a person who uses particular psychotherapeutic techniques originated with Sigmund Freud and his followers. Psychoanalysts without MD degree are known as lay analysts. The confusion between the fields arises because both provide psychotherapy. Many clinical psychologists practice in community mental health centers, mental hospitals, and private practice. Counseling psychologist. They generally work with people who have milder emotional and personal problems. They are often consulted by people with specific questions, such as career or educational program. In their practice they make extensive use of tests to measure aptitudes, interests, and personality characteristics. School psychologist. Diagnose learning difficulties and try to remedy them. They use tests and information gained from consultations with student and his or her parents, to pinpoint the problem and suggest action to correct it. Educational psychologist. Are concerned with increasing the efficiency of learning in school by applying their psychological knowledge about learning and motivation to the curriculum. Experimental psychologist. Study how behavior is modified and how people retain these modifications, the processing of information in thinking, how human sensory system work to allow people to experience what is going on around them, and the factors that urge them on and give direction to behavior. Physiological psychologist. Are concerned with the relationship of the brain and other biological activity to behavior. Industrial and organizational psychology. The first application of psychology to the problems of industries and organizations was the use of intelligence and aptitude tests in selecting employees. Psychology is applied to problems of management and employee training, to supervision of personnel, to improving communication with the organization, to counseling employees, and to alleviating industrial strife. Psychologists who do this work are known as personnel psychologists. Social psychologist. They study how individuals are affected by other people, determinants of interpersonal influences and attitude change. Sometimes the interest is on the mutual influence exerted by individuals in close relationships. They have developed and perfected techniques for measuring attitudes and opinions. Developmental psychologist. They try to understand complex behaviors by studying their beginnings and the orderly ways in which they change with time. They are also both in research such as development of thinking in children and application concerned with children who have behavior problems. Community psychologist. They apply psychological principles, ideas, and points of view to help solve social problems and to help individuals adapt to their work and living groups. Do like and subscribe to get updates on Part 4, Schools of Psychology.